Hello, and welcome to Tolkien Reading Day. March 25th is remembered as the day the ring was destroyed in Middle-earth. It also marks Gondor's New Year, so without further ado, I present to you Shelob's Lair. As for Sauron, he knew where she lurked. It pleased him that she would dwell there hungry, but unabated in malice. A more such watch upon the ancient path into his land than any other that his skill could have devised. And orcs, they were useful slaves, but he had them in plenty. If now and again Shelob caught them to stay her appetite, she was welcome. He could spare them, and sometimes as a man may cast a dainty to his cat, Sauron would send her prisoners that he had no better uses for. He would have them driven to her hole, and report back to him of the play she made. So they both lived, delighting in their own devices, and feared no assault, nor wrath, nor any end of their wickedness. Never yet had any fly escaped from Shelob's webs, and the greater now was her rage and hunger. But nothing of this evil which they had stirred up against them did poor Sam know, except that a fear was growing on him, a menace which he could not see, and such a weight did it become that it was a burden to him to run, and his feet seemed leaden. Dread was round him, enemies before him in the pass, and his master was in a fey mood, running heedlessly to meet them. Turning his eyes away from the shadow behind, and the deep gloom beneath the cliff upon his left, he looked ahead, and he saw two things that increased his dismay. He saw that the sword, which Frodo still held unsheathed, was glittering with blue flame, and he saw that through the sky behind was now dark. Still, the window in the tower was glowing red. "Orcs," he muttered. "We'll never rush it like this. There's orcs about, and worse than orcs." Then returning quickly to his long habit of secrecy, he closed his hand about the precious field which he still bore. Red with his own living blood in his hand, shone for a moment, and then he thrust the revealing light deep into a pocket near his breast, and drew his elven cloak about him. Now he tried to quicken his pace. His master was gaining on him. Already he was on some 20 strides ahead, like a shadow. Soon he would be lost to sight in that grey world. Hardly had Sam hidden the light of the star-glass, when she came a little way ahead, and to his left he saw suddenly, issuing from a black hole of shadow under the cliff, the most loathly shape that he had ever beheld, horrible, beyond the horror of an evil dream. Most like a spider she was, but huger than the great hunting beasts, and more terrible than they, because of the evil purpose in her remorseless eyes, those same eyes that he had thought daunted and defeated. There they were lit with a fell light again, clustering in her in-out thrust head. Great horns she had, and behind her short, stalk-like neck was a huge swollen body, and a vast bloated bag, swaying and sagging between her legs. Its great bulk was black, blotched with livid marks, but the belly underneath her was pale and luminous, and gave forth a stench. Her legs were bent with great knobbed joints, high above her back, and hairs that stuck out like steel spines, and at each leg's end there was a claw. As soon as she had squeezed her soft, scorching body and its folded limbs out of the upper exit from her lair, she moved with a horrible speed, now running on her creaking legs, now making a sudden bound. She was between Sam and his master. Either she did not see Sam, or she avoided him for the moment as the bearer of the light, and fixed all her intent upon one prey, upon Frodo. Bereft of his file, running heedless up the path, unaware yet of his peril, swiftly he ran. But Shelob was swifter. In a few leaps she would have him. Sam gasped, and gathered all his remaining breath to shout, "Look out behind!" he yelled. "Look out, master! I'm But suddenly, his cry was stifled. A long clammy hand went over his mouth, and another caught him by the neck, while something wrapped itself about his leg. Taken off his guard, he toppled backwards into the arms of his attacker. "Got him," hissed Gollum in his ear. "At last, my precious, we've got him. Yes, the nasty hobbit. We take this one, she'll get the other. Oh yes, Shelob will get him, not Smeagol," he promised. "He won't hurt Master at all, but he's got you, you nasty filthy little sneak," he spat on Sam's neck. Fury at the treachery and desperation at the delay when his master was in deadly peril gave to Sam a sudden violence and strength that was far beyond anything that Gollum had expected from this slow, stupid hobbit as he thought him. Not Gollum himself could have twisted more quickly or more fiercely. His hold on Sam's mouth slipped, and Sam ducked and lunged forward again, trying to tear away from the grip on his neck. His sword was still in his hand, and on his left arm, hanging by its thong, was Faramir's staff. Desperately, he tried to turn and stab his enemy, but Gollum was too quick. His long right arm shot out, and he grabbed Sam's wrist. His fingers were like a vice. Slowly and relentlessly, he bent the hand down and forward, till with a cry of pain, Sam released the sword and it fell to the ground. And all the while, Gollum's other hand was tightening on Sam's throat. Then Sam played his last trick. With all his strength, he pulled away and got his feet firmly planted, and then suddenly, he drove his legs against the ground, and with his whole force, hurled himself backwards. Not expecting even this simple trick from Sam, Gollum fell over, with Sam on top, and he received the weight of the sturdy hobbit in his stomach. A sharp hiss came out of him, and for a second his hand upon Sam's throat loosened, but his fingers still gripped the sword hand. Sam tore himself forward and away, and stood up, and then quickly he wheeled away to his right, pivoted on the wrist held by Gollum. Laying hold of the staff with his left hand, Sam swung it up, and down it came with a whistling crack on Gollum's outstretched arm, just below the elbow. With a squeal, Gollum let go. Then Sam waded in. Not waiting to change the staff from left to right, he dealt another savage blow. Quick as a snake, Gollum slithered aside, and the stroke aimed at his head fell across his back. The staff cracked and broke. That was enough for him. Grabbing from behind with an old game of his, and seldom had he failed in it. But this time, misled by spite, he had made the mistake of speaking and gloating before he had both hands on his victim's neck. Everything had gone wrong with his beautiful plan, since that horrible light had so unexpectedly appeared in the darkness. And now he was face to face with a furious enemy, little less than his own size. This fight was not for him. Sam swept up his sword from the ground and raised it. Gollum squealed, and springing aside onto all fours, he jumped away in one big bound like a frog. Before Sam could reach him, he was off, running with amazing speed, back towards the tunnel. Sword in hand, Sam went after him. For the moment he had forgotten everything else but the red fury in his brain and the desire to kill Gollum. But before he could overtake him, Gollum was gone. Then as the dark hole stood before him, and the stench came out to meet him, like a clap of thunder, the thought of Frodo and the monster smote upon Sam's mind. He spun round and rushed wildly up the path, calling and calling his master's name. He was too late. So far, Gollum's plan had succeeded. I hope you enjoyed this reading. This is a collaboration between the other Tolkien YouTube channels, so be sure to check out their readings as well. They should all be in the playlist called Tolkien Reading Day 2021. I am also currently in the midst of writing my own theory titled What If Shelob Killed Frodo, so be sure to keep an eye out for that in the coming days. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button to stay up to date with all my content. Han Lair for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode of Lord of the Rings Theory. Namari.
embrace the power of the ring, or embrace your own destruction.
Renewed shall be